And we're off. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome. It is the 27th of February, 2025. My name is Luke Thomas, and welcome to episode, what number is this? 243 of my live chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. On the docket today, boys and girls, we have been very lucky. 2 weeks in a row, the day before a live chat, there was this like avalanche of UFC announcements. We'll get to all of those, the ones that came out last night related to, let's see, Justin Gaethje's new opponent. By the way, Jamahal Hill has a great fight coming up for those who are into, pre-meth Hitler. Bryce Mitchell has a fight coming up as well. By the way, the matchmaking on that one's pretty good. But okay, whatever you want to get to related to that, that's on the docket. Plus, this weekend, we have the Tank Davis return against Lamont Roach, something of an all-DC affair. Or mostly DC affair anyway. And what else? A bunch of other stuff, I'm sure. A million other things. So thumbs up if you're watching. Hit subscribe if you'd be so kind. We have a lot of show to get to. So without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? All right. Very good. Boys and girls, lock in your calendars. Ready? March 17th. Lock in your calendars. There will be an announcement that day. Be ready for it. March 17th. That's a Monday, I believe, right? It should be. My math is right. Yes. Yes, March 17th, a Monday. Should be the Monday. You know what? Now that I'm sitting here talking out of my ass, let me verify. I could have sworn that I had it right, but here I am, fucking shit up. So let me just make sure. Yes, March 17th is, let's see, it's a Monday. Yeah. All right. So be on the lookout. March 17th. Important announcement. All right. So that'll be that. Anything else from last time? I still am a little bit behind on some emails, but I've tried to answer a bunch last week. So if you guys got one answered, great. If you didn't, hang on. I'm still getting through all of them. There's actually a lot the last couple of months or a couple of weeks anyway. So yeah. All right. I think that's it. You guys know how this goes. I put up a thread the day before. You fill it up with questions. People vote to the top, the ones they want to get to. We'll do that for about an hour, and then we'll get to the paid portion of the live chat. So if you'd be so kind and you want to get into the paid portion, it really helps the channel. Fire something into the super chat. We'll put your question on the screen, and we'll get to it at the end. The only exemption for that would be if you're a member. If you're a member, you don't have to pay for that at all. Okay? All right. Very good. Let's refresh this one so we get the most up-to-the-date answers, and let's get going. Here we go. Right. Okay. Can y'all see? Let me put a little higher. There we go. Okay. Could it be that referees hesitate to intervene, you wrote, and take points for fouls due to pressure from UFC? Judges go the same way. Dana is known for hating draws, e.g., yes, they all answer to commissions, but UFC, being the giant it is, has a word in which referees they want and don't want to work with, kicking out Yamasaki and referees who screw up even on the fly. Referees and judges want to work with the UFC since UFC is basically the sport at this point, so they act, quote-unquote, loyal. I thought of this conspiracy theory after the recent UFC Seattle press conference, where Dana, when asked about taking points for eye pokes after Cejudo's fight, hesitated and said, no, only if they are intentional. So we know his stance, which, by the way, we already addressed that part on MK, which is that there is an entire body of rules and regulatory framework around, yes, intentional fouling, but also unintentional fouling. And in fact, most fouling that takes place is at least ostensibly unintentional. So like only taking a point for fucking Three Stooges, aside from like the difficulty in even identifying whether or not things are in fact intentional, which by the way is its own little difficulty. We kind of already covered that. It's a silly argument to make. It's not even workable as a thing. Do I think they're acting in accordance with UFC? Not really. The thing that caused that Dana White's ire the most over time has been, yes, bad judging, but it has been more so refereeing. Guys like John Shorley, and then everyone knows the story of Steve Mazzagatti. And, I did watch Steve Mazzagatti's refereeing career basically collapse as a result of the assault that Dana White put him under. And I'm not here to say that Dana White didn't have any, that there wasn't merit to what he was saying. There was some merit to what he was saying. Like Mazzagatti is not necessarily the best referee that I've ever seen, but I would tell you that the commissions do feel the heat on judges, but they tend to get rotated enough. And again, there's some lifers that are there, and the lifers tend to turn in bad cards, but not like it just doesn't raise the ire of the UFC all that much, at least publicly. They might be asking commissions, and in particular Nevada behind the scenes, since they do so many shows at the Apex, they might be asking them for ones that they prefer over others. But I don't get the sense that the judges, or sorry, you're asking about referees. Well, let me just stick with the judges for just a second, because I got off track a little bit. But just with the judges, I just feel like there's enough rotation that comes in over time where you just don't see them lashing out, or even from what we can detect publicly or even privately lobbying them. Now, apologies. The question was about the referees. Does the referees hesitate to intervene and take points? That would be a question for referees. That's a really hard one to note. To the best of what we can approximate, we do know that they take their marching orders, as they should, from what the relevant commission or broader commission structure in terms of what the ABC, the Association of Boxing Commissions, does from a leadership standpoint, and what those guidelines then ended up being by the time they get into the hands of referees. So there's like this sort of like chain of custody of officiating thought that defines how the referees act. That is going to be far and away the biggest contributor to it, because you can explain a lot of what they do by virtue of that. You can explain a lot of that. However, on the other point, I have just heard many referees tell me privately and publicly, this is not anything that they necessarily hide, that, you know, if they're trying to sell instructionals or courses or visibility for one of their businesses, being a UFC or being a referee that gets put on big UFC assignments is great for their business, or at least as a sort of a steady way to draw attention to it. Now, not all of them necessarily cash in that way, but definitely some do. And so you do have to wonder there, would they stop it in such a way to be more pleasing to the UFC? But again, I'm going to go back here. Like sometimes knowing what the UFC would prefer is not necessarily obvious to them, and nor do you necessarily get handed situations where you can kind of think in real time, oh, what would the UFC prefer me do? So I cannot state to you that they are free from blame or free from these kinds of pressures. But without them opening up about how they feel about this, or to what extent they've ever felt any pressure to perform in a way that is pleasing to UFC, it's just impossible to know. It's not a bad question. It's just impossible to know. What happens to the heavyweight division if John, presumably John Jones, thoroughly outclasses Tom and retires? Disaster. That would be a disaster. Straight up. I mean, there's no other way to put that. That'd be disaster. It's bad enough that Tom, after John or whatever happens with him, has no real rival. You can make the Gane fight. I don't think that's the worst fight in the world. We've talked about this. There are reasons to believe that fight would be fun in certain ways, but it's hard for me to believe that over time Gane's going to win that one. And that's the best that they can probably do in the absence of John. So, like, let me be clear. Like, even if John fights Tom and loses and Tom looks great, it's not like they've got a very simple pivot to go to. This is a barren wasteland of a division. And I saw, who was it? Chris Wade, former UFC fighter, former PFL, I think tournament's finalist, saying that what ends up happening is the guys who get to the front of the line and end up getting signed by the UFC, and this is not just the UFC, this is true from promotions more generally, but since the UFC is the biggest game in town by a mile, we're going to focus the attention there. It's just who the managers promote. Like, the manager puts forward a guy, puts forward the person, and that's how the UFC ends up doing their scouting, rather than having an active scouting department to go and find the very best guys that they can. Sort of assume that the very best guys will get hoovered up by the very best managers, and then the very best, or at least the most connected managers. And then the most connected managers will then tell them about it. But I think a lot of problems exist doing that as a sort of, beyond just beyond the spoils system that gets developed by a process like that, you're just also not necessarily finding the best talent. But there's a bigger question, which is, okay, it's one thing to be like, well, we need better recruitment efforts, not so much for heavyweight per se, but for the broader MMA weight classes. And I do believe that that is true. But is there really a lot of evidence that there's a lot of undiscovered super elite heavyweights at this point? I mean, there's Gable Steveson. Maybe they're going to wait on him to come back. That could be kind of an interesting thing, right? Slow build him a little bit, see what happens. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not just recruitment in terms of identifying who is out there. They need a recruitment effort to like goad people into the sport. And I don't know how that fixes the division in the short run. In fact, I don't think that it does. In fact, there's any way that it could. I see that as much more of a long-term project that they should already be invested in. But, you know, if John goes in there and just absolutely obliterates Tom's the best thing that they have after that. This division is, I mean, he already destroyed light heavyweight. He might destroy heavyweight in the process. I mean, obviously there's other factors in play that would also have kind of either destroyed or already destroyed heavyweight. But, you know, the symbolism there would be hard to ignore. That division is hanging on by a thread. It has barely any good fighters in it. It's got a few, definitely has got a few, but most of them, even if they're good, they have no real rivalries, not merely with Tom, but not even really with each other. That's the other part about it too. There's not even any sub-Tom rivalries you can kind of point to as like interesting or relevant. Everything is just kind of mix and match, mix and match. Every card is just kind of modular. Change this one, change that one, change this one, and it all just kind of fits together, but there's really never any magnetism between them. This is a division in ruin. So I don't think you can fix it, even if Tom comes out like looking like $1 million having beaten John's ass or something like that in this scenario that we're positing. Even that can't save it because you have nowhere to pivot to. This is a much bigger problem than either John or frankly Tom can solve. They cannot solve it. It's a much, much bigger issue for sure. Okay, true or false? I used to do a bunch of these. Paddy Pimblett's next fight will be for the title should he beat Chandler. Okay, well, I'll let you... Here, I'm going to read these real quick. Jamahal Hill gets cut. Should he lose to Rountree? You know what? I'll leave him up because it's a little hard to go back and forth. Paddy Pimblett's next fight will be for the title should he beat Chandler. False. Jamahal Hill gets cut. Should he lose to Rountree? Definitely false. Justin Gaethje's last fight will happen in 2025. True. Seattle was the last UFC fight for Cejudo. False. Tatiana Suarez will become a UFC champion. False. A former Bellator/PFL fighter will become a UFC champion by the end of 2026. Ooh. So that means you could have Pitbull do it. You could have potentially Pico do it. Chandler. I don't know if Gaethje would count. I don't expect that he would win. I'll say false. The first attempt at a 3-division UFC champion status, not simultaneous, will happen by the end of 2026. False. Bryce Mitchell will be thrown a beer during his walkout at 314 in Florida. If not for the walkout, certainly the return to the locker room. Yeah. What did you think of referee Jason Herzog responding to Cejudo on his podcast, admitting he should have taken a point and made a mistake? I said it on Monday. I'll repeat it, part of that here, which is I think Jason Herzog is one of the very best referees that the sport has. Lucky to have him. And it's funny to say that, obviously, in a scenario where we're talking about an error that he made, and I do think he made an error, but nevertheless, like, this is an insanely difficult job. It is absurd to imagine that they are always going to bat 1,000. It's absurd. I mean, if for any Americans who are watching, you know what I'm about to say. For any Europeans, please understand, like, look at American football, where the referees routinely, even with the benefit of sometimes, a great angle, will get a call wrong. Then it has to be reviewed, and then they'll review the call and then reverse it. This happens all the time. This might even happen once a freaking game. It's a very, very common thing. Why? Because it's obvious that they can't make the very correct calls, the most correct calls in real time. They can make many good calls that way if they're very talented, but even the very talented ones are going to miss stuff. What you want to do is give them a place to fix it. And I think that's a bigger conversation about how we do that in the rules and ways in which points can be taken. But nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make here is, absent that kind of ready architecture that football has built in for itself, at least you have a referee willing to face the music about questionable judgments that he made, a decision that he made, and to then acknowledge that there was probably a better way to do that. Of course, that doesn't fix the loss on Cejudo's record, and for that, we can obviously say that Herzog made a mistake. However, in general, he makes very good calls. He trains. It is obvious that he cares. It is obvious that he has the appropriate amount of humility, that frankly, this is what that guy is, a public servant. Remember, this is run by the government. These are public servants. They're doing a public good to a degree anyway. The state, the administrative and regulatory state, has said that there's no interest in banning mixed martial arts, but there is an interest in regulating it. And as such, Jason Herzog, in his role as referee, is a public servant. And I think as a public servant, having the transparency and the humility and the willingness to learn to get better, this is everything you want in a referee. I don't want a referee who pretends to be perfect, because I know they are not. I don't need a referee who pretends to be perfect, because I know they are not. It cannot be the case that they always get it right. What we need is a better mechanism to help them correct errors if possible. And then on the other end, acknowledge mistakes about the application of the rules, and a better way to do it going forward, as a way to not merely acknowledge that they understand wrongdoing occurred, but as a way to build confidence that they'll get it right the next time. Dude, I thought it was awesome. And I think it took I mean, Henry was beating him up a little strong, I thought, but whatever. You just, how many times do you see referees do this? It just is so, I mean, some do it on occasion. Great. I'm not saying Herzog has a monopoly on, acknowledging error in the combat sports officiating space, but I've always thought highly of Jason Herzog. I continue to think highly of Jason Herzog, and I hope an episode like this can really show people there are people in this sport, in the officiating world, who actually are committed to trying to do the best job that they can, both on days where they're really locked on and on days where they maybe just didn't get it right. I want the person that actually cares. I don't need someone who thinks of themselves as having, just this grand officiating wisdom, whether judge or referee or any other version of officiant in the total taxonomy of everyone who does this. I need someone who, yes, generally gets it right, and then when they don't, they try to make up for it in a real, meaningful way. And again, we don't have the best mechanism to do that, but going and talking to Henry and then saying, this could have been done a different way. This is exactly what you want. You need more referees like Jason Herzog, not less. It is certainly unfortunate for Henry that he got a loss on his record when there shouldn't have been one put there. Okay. I understand that that's probably going to be a sore spot for him. Fair enough. But Jason Herzog has my total confidence, not my total confidence that he'll always get it right every single time, but that he'll generally get it right. And should a mistake occur, I think he'll take the appropriate action to do his very best to make sure that error doesn't happen a secondary time. Luke, with the benefit of hindsight, was Henry Cejudo walking away at his peak as a negotiating ploy, only to come back 3 years later and go 0-3, the most boneheaded career decision in MMA history? It's up there. It's up there. The argument can be made that at the time Henry walked away, that maybe somebody he was going to face next, whether it was a Jan or somebody else, they would have taken the belt from him, because bantamweight was really getting ready to surge with a new set of fresh faces. And that's, to me, a very strong argument. I mean, how long is anybody going to hold the belt at 135? Merab's probably going to show us what that looks like. You know what I mean? It's going to be very, very difficult to take that away from him. And, but even then, it's not like he's going to go on an Anderson Silva. It's at least unlikely anyway that he's going to go on an Anderson Silva-like run. It's a very, very difficult division in which to do well. So it is very possible that he could have stayed around and then just lost his next fight after the Dominic Cruz fight. It's entirely possible. The problem is, and this is simply incontestable, he walked away at the very peak of his powers with a belt. That is the time you are going to, in all likelihood, that is the time you are going to make the most amount of money that you can make. That's not a time when you can really boss around the UFC because they're just not going to let. Dude, they've let heavyweight fall into disrepair before inviting Francis back. Think about that for a second. We just talked about how shit heavyweight is. I'm not saying also that just bringing Francis back solves everything, but it would be helpful. It'd be real helpful. It'd be super helpful to have him back, right? Like we can all agree on that. They'll let him remain in exile and let that division just fall into absolute dog shit ruin before they bring him back. You cannot leverage them. You cannot leverage them. It cannot be done, not under the current power structure. Not Conor McGregor, not Ronda Rousey, not Francis, not anybody, not Brock, not Kane. Nobody can do it to him. They have too many assets. They have too many ways in which they can just leverage the broader set of, competing resources, basically, and power structures. So if you wanted to make money in this sport, you would do it at the very interval that he left. I'm sympathetic to the idea that, like, it's not a guarantee he would have gone on some generational run. In fact, again, as I mentioned, he could have lost his very next fight. But at least that very next fight, he would have been entitled to pay-per-view points. I mean, he just gave all that away. So is it the worst decision I've ever seen? I mean, I've definitely seen some worse ones. But if the goal was to maximize available prize money and, the kinds of legacy-defining fights that I'm guessing an athlete of his caliber would care about, to walk away when he did. And again, let me say one more thing. Maybe there was something going on in his personal life. Maybe he just wasn't feeling it anymore. Maybe he just couldn't get up for it. Maybe, like, if that's the way you feel, even if you are at the peak of your powers and the peak of your contractual earning ability by virtue of having titles, it doesn't matter if you're not right up here. You know what I mean? Who knows? I'm speculating, obviously, but I'm trying to introduce ways in which we can understand and the motivations behind his actions beyond just like getting it wrong. That could have been a big one. But that window that was left right there after the Cruz fight, that was the window to cash in. And this is what happens when you don't. Here we go. Can you see? Yes. All right. This person writes, I'm a millennial, and alongside my work in schools and colleges, I have cousins, nephews, and nieces who are of Generation Z and Alpha. For my extended time spent in and around these groups, I find it difficult to foresee a sustainable MMA fan base coming up behind Gen Z. What are your thoughts? Excuse me. What are your thoughts on the next replenishment of fans, if there will be one? The UFC has always been a really strong attractor of the youth, particularly young men. Obviously not exclusively, but predominantly young men. They've always been pretty good at that. They've been pretty good at just making sure that they are attractive to that population, and the population itself kind of, obviously young people are going to be a little bit more interested in organized violence than older people. That tends to be a continuous theme of the human condition. But I don't know about the next generation in the sense that, like, this atomized world where there are just subgenres and subgenres, and you're watching, mainstream organs of, for example, just broadcasting entities just losing their ass over a decline in sports viewership. And of course, like, some of those teams are still maintaining similar population or similar fan base sizes. But, in a world where, like, I grew up, and most of you probably grew up in a world where sports were, preeminent cultural enterprises. I'm not sure how much that's going to be true in the next 20 years. I think other things will supplant the primacy of sports in our culture as a way to interface with culture. They will just be less dominant. Now, it's just strange credulity to think that, like, there won't be sports. That's really not at all what I'm saying. And in fact, if you just look at American television, like the only thing keeping that afloat is the NFL. And I don't think that will change anytime soon. But there's a canary in the coal mine there. Like a lot fewer kids are doing American football by virtue of CTE concerns. And, like God only knows what the preference and incentive structure is going to look like for young people who just don't grow up in a world where sports has this primacy over us that is that is now fading. So I'm not super doomerish about it. I tend to think that like there'll be some kind of an audience for combat sports. I mean, it kind of always has been to a degree, like watching two people, slug it out, for lack of a better description. This is something that has stood the test of time in the human experience in one fashion or another. But I agree with you that it is something to pay attention to as sports just becomes one of many distractions that the youth engage in, and it becomes just significantly less important as in terms of its cultural primacy. But I mean, it's still so early to tell. I don't know. It's not like I'm talking to Gen A and Gen Z guys all the time. You know what I mean? It's not like a thing that I do. Look, on Monday's Morning Combat, UNBC were discussing the best late replacement fights. Now the condition was 72 hours or less. And one of them is Joe Soto versus TJ Dillashaw at UFC 177 in 2014. I remember that. Soto on like 24 hours notice. Dillashaw was set to defend his bantamweight title against Barral, but Barral, was pulled due to a bad weight cut the day before. Soto, making his UFC debut, stepped in on 24 hours notice and put up a tough fight, but Dillashaw won by 5th round knockout to retain his belt. That is true. That's a true one. But it's like, that was a fine effort from Joe Soto, 100%. But the question ultimately then becomes is like, okay, would it have been better to have waited for the Barral fight rather than just to have this one? This one is probably not one of those cases. You don't mind necessarily seeing Joe Soto step up, get a big check, and for a fight to continue. But the question you have to ask yourself is, in all of these replacement considerations, you're expecting a downgrade, right? It can't be it just seems so unlikely that whatever replacement you come up with is going to be as good as the original. That's okay. The question is it a gigantic drop-off? Is the drop-off so significant, in fact, is it even worth it? And I would argue that in the Soto case, it's worth it probably to keep it going. In many cases, I would have rather them just call the whole thing off. Like, wait till we can make this thing happen on the appropriate time scale. Your mileage will vary on that. I don't think there's one right answer to it. People are going to have different opinions. They're going to see this one very differently. Some people just want to see the show go on no matter what. I'm not one of those types. I'd rather see the show that I want to see go on rather than any old version of the show go on. But I absolutely recognize there's a big diversity of thought around that. And it's just not the case that, most people would agree with me on that one. In fact, I think most would agree the other way, although there is obviously some reservation about it. Yeah. But there are examples. There are definitely examples of sometimes you get a real late notice one, and all of a sudden it just becomes really good. All right. Okay. Dana doesn't want to do Cejudo-Song rematch because Cejudo is a declining fighter on a 3-fight losing streak and expensive. He is damaged goods for UFC now. It's a little strong, but not entirely wrong. And Dana probably still has a grudge against him for retiring. At the same time, they probably want to save Song for some summer event in China. Do you agree? Probably. I don't think Dana has like deep disdain for Henry Cejudo, but I don't think that it does not appear to me he looks at Cejudo and thinks this is a person of long-term or even present value. Doesn't look that way to me. Looks to me like he's made a calculation that like this is not interesting to us. We'll run it out as long as there's a need to run it out, and then we'll move on from it. Like, I don't get, Dana does hold grudges, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't get the sense that he I know people believe that, like, oh, he loathes Henry Cejudo for retiring at his prime, but it's like, and of course there's always a possibility of that. Like Dana, as I mentioned, is a grudge holder, but I tend to look at it more from a calculated point of, to the point you raised, old, losing, probably not. I mean, none of these guys are expensive to UFC, but such that they can get a contract like that off the books and replace it with a Contender Series 1, that's going to be preferable. But people think that like Dana's doing this out of like some deep, like, hardcore disdain for Henry Cejudo. And I'm like, that seems a little strong. Yeah, here we go. You're a DC guy. That's right. So I have to get your take on Elon Musk gloating about unemployment levels rising in that city. Yeah, we've barely begun, too. We've barely begun. They're going to crash the housing market. I mean, there's really no doubt about that, which sucks for me because next month is my last payment on this house. And my hope was to sell it in the next 4 to 5 years and then use that towards a substantial portion of my retirement. And now I'm sure those prices are going to take a hit. I don't know what that's going to do. I don't know how bad it's going to be. I would imagine that, and I think some of the numbers, well, it's a little too early to say, but my hunch is that it's going to be worse in the suburbs than it is in the city proper. But it's going to be bad everywhere. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care who he hurts at all. It doesn't matter to him even a little bit. Guys, I lived through, during the Bush and Obama years, I lived through great long media reports about the decline in American use of coal technology and what this was going to mean for coal miners and how we had to do whatever we could to transition them to a new kind of work. And some of these were really ham-fisted, like, let's make them all coders. Well, okay, that didn't work. I mean, there was some retraining, there was some lateral moves that were possible and that were made in parts of West Virginia and other parts of Appalachia where these coal mining jobs are really significant. Some of that was able to be successful. A lot of it was not. But that's not because there wasn't emphasis put on it. And there were all these stories about how all these hard luck people, which these are, working class, tough people that don't necessarily, get by on having a lot of things handed to them. But the innumerable stories that went by, the innumerable profiles about how we had to do something to make sure that there was, I don't know about a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but they had some kind of training so they weren't just left high and dry. And now they're just gutting vast reams of the administrative state and then gloating about their suffering. Dude, these people don't have any fucking principles. They don't have any first principles that guide their actions other than avarice. And I hope that everyone can understand this. I mean, he's finding waste, fraud, and abuse. No, the fuck he's not. There is all kinds of waste, fraud, and abuse that I'm sure that is happening. He's not really interested in any of that. They're going to cancel this Verizon contract with the FAA so that he can introduce Starlink. It's self-dealing while they tear down the regulatory state. That's all that there is. And then gloating that those people are now on the street. I was actually taking my daughter to gymnastics. She goes right off Capitol Hill. There's a gymnastics gym that I take her to. And there was a woman walking by crying, sobbing, talking to a friend, and she was carrying her desk, and not her desk, I'm sorry, but a box with all of her desk belongings in it. And I remember, I'll never forget what she said when she walked right by. And she goes, 17 years of my life I gave to the federal government for this. And everybody thinks it's all a bunch of people even to my left who are in there. And I have to tell you, that is not who staffs the federal fucking government. That is not. I mean, of course, there's some of those people, but there is just as many down the center and then just as many to the right. And it's not just DC. It's one of the main job contributors to places like Kansas City and places like Colorado. There are vast reams of federal employees all over the place, and there are more cuts coming, bigger, much bigger ones down the line. And to show callous fucking indifference in this way, it just tells you who the fuck they are. Because when the shoe is on the other foot, they expect you to have sympathy for the people that are, listen, like maybe the federal government does need to be downsized in some kind of more structured and organized way. And maybe you can't save all of coal mining, because some of these job losses are simply inevitable in a changing political structure and a changing economy. Okay, fair enough. but then taking pride in this. And especially when you're the richest guy in the world and you're just ripping apart the administrative state in order to do it. Dude, he's a fucking coward. He's a fucking thief. He's a vandal of American democracy. He's a vandal of the federal government. He is a vandal and a self-dealer if ever there was one, man. And it's so fucking nakedly obvious in front of you that this is all about destroying the regulatory capacity of the government to inhibit his business while he self-deals. That's the whole fucking game here. Actually, you know what? There's a bigger game being played. And I've brought this up before. I've brought it up before. During the civil rights era, the government, the federal government in particular, had to grow the capacity of the administrative state when they began taking seriously that, hey, if we're going to integrate the races and we're going to protect the rights of these people, we don't really have, in certain cases, anything in the administrative state to protect this. We have to grow various versions of it, and it's not even necessarily racial related. There could be other forms of it. For example, when the Cuyahoga River in Ohio in the 70s is on fire, they passed the Clean Water Act, but then, obviously there has to be a greater portion of the regulatory state that can control that is the EPA, right? These are things that are done, not merely in that case to simply improve the more public good spaces, and then the regulatory state that has to go into it, but more crucially along the lines of, if we're going to grant rights to people beyond who we've been granting rights to, women, minorities, this different political coalition, we're going to have to build out part of the administrative state, the regulatory state, and the federal government to protect them. Musk is stripping that out. That's what's happening. He's stripping that out, or doing his best to strip it out. This motherfucker can't stop lying. Whether it's a small thing, like I'm one of the world's best Diablo players, bitch, you're not even halfway decent. Whether it's the RFK Stadium deal, which I talk about all the time, where he's just telling the public that you're on the hook for it when none of that is true. Or more recently, saying, we made a mistake cutting Ebola prevention and detection services abroad with USAID, but we quickly restored it. Everyone who worked on that program was like, no, the fuck you didn't. None of that was restored. And then having to claw back people that they fired, whether it was folks who were in charge of, nuclear weapons, whether it was more, even today, he's out there tweeting like, oh, we accidentally fired him. Well, sorry, he didn't say it this way. Hey, if you're retired and you want to get back into the FAA, we need air traffic controllers. It's like, dude, do you all know that job requires you to be retired by 56 because of how insane and difficult and high stress it is? And this asswipe is just sitting there letting them go and then creating, what is it, the State Department contract for $400 million for Tesla vehicles, going to get rid of Verizon for fucking Starlink. He's just plugging in, stealing all of your data and my data. And people think that this fucking douchebag is on your side. Motherfucker, look at me very plainly. Your life is like mine. You're probably middle class. I'm middle class. Your kids go to public school. My kids go to public school. By the way, this deadbeat motherfucker can't even see his own children. And when people try to tweet their way at him, he fucking shadow bans them. It is time for some of you to desperately wake up about who this fucking guy is. He is stealing from you. He is stealing from you. He is destroying the parts of the government that they don't protect him. They protect you. In fact, they protect you from people like him. To gloat about civil servants giving their career and big portions of their life to sometimes mundane, but otherwise actually pretty valuable jobs that we have created, both as part of this broader regulatory state to take care of people's rights, but also just to provide reasonable quality of life and for the government to do useful things, just fucking tearing it apart. Doesn't give a shit who he hurts, doesn't give a shit what gets fucked up, nothing, as long as his businesses, the Boring Company, fucking Starlink, fucking SpaceX, whatever self-dealing and data theft he can do, he'll do that. He doesn't give a fuck about you. Why? Because he tweets like, oh, I don't think trans fucking athletes should be on the court in colleges. There's 9 of them, Elon. Now where are we? Where are we? How about all of these other fucking issues? He's a thief. He's a thief. He's a thief and a fucking vandal of American democracy. And I really, if you don't see it now, trust me, you're gonna. Because all the reporting from the Hill states that, like, all of these cuts, this is just the first few innings. Buddy, we haven't even hit the 7th inning stretch on this. These dumb motherfuckers are going to send hundreds of thousands of people into the unemployment rolls while getting rid of all the cheap labor in the country, while upping the costs on both commercial as well as consumer goods from our two of our biggest trading partners. They're going to crash the fucking economy. That is absolutely coming. Mark my fucking words. That is coming. I mean, here locally, there's going to be a recession. No two ways about it, like locally, but it'll be bigger than that, quite obviously. And he is fucking stealing from you to line his own pockets. And then again, God bless Joe Rogan. He's done a lot of great things, but being like, oh, well, Elon's the guy who doesn't need any money. Joe, he had more money than he could spend $350 billion ago. Now he's got that more, and he wants even more than that. He's stealing from you. And sooner or later, it's going to hit your world. Here, obviously, in D.C., I'm on the front lines of it in a sense. I mean, I don't work at the federal government or anything, but, I know a ton. I mean, all of my friends are either in the federal government or the defense contractors or consultants or, you name it. And, not all those jobs need to exist. I grant. That motherfucker is stealing from you. He is stealing from you. He is stealing from your kids. He is stealing from your fucking grandma. He is lining his fucking pockets at your expense. And don't even try to make an argument that your interests are aligned with his. Bitch, they're not. Your interest, and I know this hurts the heart of some of you to say this, your interests are aligned with mine, not his. Our lives are basically similar. I mean, you view things differently on a lot of things than me, but like in terms of where we're rooted to the ground, your life is very similar to mine. He doesn't give a fuck about us. That's what I think. Your chat with MMA Joey was really good. Hope to see more, no question. Yeah, by the way, I found this out. He lives in, well, I don't know if I can say this or not. I'll say this. He lives not far from here. So I said if we ever did it again, it'd be better if we could do that in person. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. With the return of Rafael Fiziev, do you think he can be champion? I thought there was a time where I thought he could. I don't know anymore. What does he need to improve to get there? First of all, fading down the stretch is bad, but I think he seemed a little small for the weight class, a little small. I think bulking up a little bit might help, but I think just mixing up his offense a little bit. Obviously, he can strike his ass off, but I think relying on that, especially if you fade, is a problem. Now, how he'd mix it, let me think about that, actually. He's got a pretty mature striking skill set. Yeah, dude, adding some different tools to his tool belt is, I think, going to be critical, and especially on the defensive wrestling end, although it's not bad on the defensive wrestling end, but even that, tightening that up, I really believe diversifying his skill set is what is needed, not sharpening the existing portions of it. Someone's asking, what do you think should be next for Cejudo? He looked good to me. I think he can still win some fights against good fighters in the bantamweight division, but he's not far from 40. Best days are behind. So, Sandhagen or I guess Sandhagen's fighting Figgy, but you know what I mean. So whoever. It doesn't really matter, just as long as they're ranked and they're reasonably decent, because, we're at the end stage here. Okay, is this the same thing? As someone who doesn't live in D.C., what is the vibe in our nation's capital right now? Not great. I've seen some stuff regarding the housing market. Oh, yeah. And the obvious slashing of jobs. It's been hard to pin down the general sentiment of our nation's capital. Is it somber, frustration, something else? Yeah. Yeah, I would say I just think there's a lot of people. Again, one of my buddies, 2 tours in Iraq, Purple Heart recipient. He lost his job in all of this. He's been given this country his best years and, his best effort for a long time. And they just told him to go fuck himself. So I think there's a lot of people who are sad. I think there's a lot of people who are don't know what their next move is going to be. I think it's real dumb to let a bunch of people in the intelligence apparatus go because that seems a little dangerous. But they're going to do that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I would say that in general, the people who live here, I'm not talking about the fucking swamp creatures who come and go every election cycle. I'm not talking about them. But the people who live here, this is, it's a straight up assault on our fucking city. Like, what is the mood supposed to be? Is it supposed to be like, oh, fucking thanks, Elon, for fucking just ripping the cords out randomly of the fucking things and seeing which electronic device comes on or doesn't, So, I don't know what's going to happen to the city as a consequence of the housing prices. I don't know what's going to happen to my retirement. I don't know what that, I'm trying to look on the positive side where if the prices crash a bunch, then I might rent this place out and go buy one that I couldn't previously afford, move to a nicer area. That's a possibility. I don't know what's going to happen, but suffice to say, if you take a bunch of people who took jobs that they could have made much more in the private sector, but they didn't want to be in the private sector because, partly they wanted stability, but also because they believed in the mission of their work, and you just put them all out on the streets, what would that do? Then this fucking dope goes and fires everyone at the Kennedy Center. And, I don't know what they're going to put up there, but, for sure, I'm not going to go buy tickets to go see fucking Kid Rock get a Mark Twain award. I can assure you that. It's just this constant need to, dude, these are not people that I hope everyone understands. I love DC. I mean, there's things about it that need to be fixed. There's things about it that are terrible, but I love this city. I've been here most of my life. I've been here some of you have even been fucking alive. This is my home. It's been my home I don't know if this isn't my home. I don't know what would be. I'm happy to see things get improved or needs addressed or whatever. But I hope everybody can look at this and see that, them trying to take over the DC government and just control these institutions and whatnot. They don't love DC. These are not people that love DC. These are people that fucking hate it and want to see it completely fucking shaken and dumped on its head because they don't understand anything about it. They won't get that even if they try, but that's really what it's at the core of it. They don't love this place. They don't love the community that's here. I do. These are my neighbors. These are the schools that my kid goes to. These are the parks that I pay my taxes to go play at. This is my home. And there's absolutely fucking nothing wrong with it in the, and it's nothing's perfect, but in some kind of it's diseased or damaged in some kind of, dude, this is what I say to everybody who if you look at some of the language in that act that they want to use to take over DC, it's like this crime-ridden hellhole. Guys, please come visit. Do not take my word for it. By no means should you take my word for it. Come see for yourself. Come see for yourself if that's what it looks like. Oh, there's all these homeless encampments that are just filling up the lawns. Okay, which ones? Which ones? Tell me. Tell me the ones on the map that are filled with homeless people. Is it Meridian Hill Park? Nope. Front of Union Station? Nope. Kennedy Center lawn? Nope. National Mall? Nope. Wharf? Nope. Where are the lawns that they're all filled up on? There's a couple by the bridge and the GW Parkway off East Street. Okay, there's some there. Totally by the GW campus. Where else are they? Where else are they? They're just fucking lying to you. I don't know how this is people think that I'm not the one telling you to accept their vision or anybody's vision, mine or theirs. I'm telling you, go see it for yourself. Take the Pepsi challenge. Oh, where are they at? Are the homeless encampments by the tidal basin, by the Jefferson Memorial, where the cherry blossoms are going to come out? Is that where they are? Nope. Where are they? Where are they? Down by the U.S. Treasury, off of Constitution? Nope. Where are they? Where are they? Are they down by Watkins Elementary and the field behind there? Nope. They're just fucking lying to you. They're lying to you because that party, for ever since they gave the city power 50 years ago, they have been trying to wrestle it back. That's the whole fucking thing. They just did not like democracy as it's applied to the city. That is the beginning and end of the conversation. 1973, that's a year that will live in infamy for some of these jamokes. And to be clear, in the 70s and 80s and even parts of the 90s, it was not great. But circa late 2000s, it's been steadily improving. And now I don't know where else the fuck I would live. I really don't. So, how is the mood? Well, for people who love the city, the people who have lived here for all of their lives, this isn't the happiest I've ever seen it, but I hope to be around for, whatever the fuck they're going to do to it. I hope that I'll be around for its renaissance if there ever is one. And I hope to be a contributor to it if there's a way. Fucking bitch ass losers trying to destroy a place that they could never win over. That's what's happened. I know his personality and the recent DDP fight really overshadows this. But where does Sean Strickland rank on the greatest defensive MMA fighters of all time? That's a good question. I always find it interesting to watch breakdowns on the subtle nuances of his defense. His striking defense is excellent. And for somebody who stays in close range, it's really, really good. But I don't know if the numbers speak to it. Let me see something here. Sean Strickland. Let's take a look at his UFC stats if we can. Let me look at his numbers here. Strikes absorbed per minute. It's what's this doesn't really speak to it. Look, so these are his career statistics, right? It says it right there. Strikes absorbed per minute, 4.57. See, that's really high. That's really high, but that doesn't make sense, right? Because he's so good at just being in the line of fire and then blocking and parrying and getting out of the way. So, but I think we need to distinguish between people who are defensively untouchable and then people who have defensive styles, because that's different. There are guys who are really, really just hard to hit. For example, Islam, as a matter of fact, look, okay, so strikes absorbed per minute for Sean Strickland, 4.57. I don't think that's by itself, that was the sole determinant about whether or not he's got good defense. That's not my point. Here we go. UFC stats. Okay, now look at this. Compare that to this. 1.55 strikes absorbed per minute for Islam Makhachev. It's a third of what it is for Sean Strickland. But I don't necessarily think that he's got more defensive skill or uses defense as a more forward part of his game in that way. But they fight different ways. Sean is in this trench warfare all the time where there's just stuff flying and he's catching, a bunch of it, but a bunch gets through too. But he's got a defense kind of first style. Islam is very defensively sound and just doesn't get hit. They can barely lay a fucking glove on him. That's a different thing. So I don't know exactly how I don't know. You need to be very careful about the arguments that people make about, best defensive fighter ever and what stats do to evidence those claims. But I definitely believe you got to draw a demarcation between fighters who have really interesting defensive styles and then people who just don't get touched, because they're not the same. I've seen this guy leave this question, so I'm going to get to it here. Look, change my mind. Pirating and streaming is the only ethical way to consume UFC as a product. Why would it be unethical to buy a pay-per-view? The argument is what? You're just contributing to monopoly or something, and then therefore, It doesn't go to the fighters, and that you're stealing from them. You're not contributing to the UFC's bottom line. You're still enjoying the product. I mean, I sort of see the loose logic there, but I feel like if you have to commit crimes, and I'm not like I think the FBI should show up at your door or something, but if you have to commit crimes to watch stuff, it's hard for me to think that you have the moral high ground. I mean, it would have to be like truly odious or otherwise. I mean, I don't even know. I understand, and I don't take any issue with athletes. What am I saying? I understand, and I don't take issue with any fans who want to boycott the product for whatever reason. How these cards are weak or blah, 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 whatever their shit is, and then trying to like use piracy as a way to force change within the company. I think that is, believe it or not, I actually think that's pretty legitimate. But your argument is it's the only ethical way to consume UFC as a product. No, I don't think that's right. I don't in any way bemoan people for boycotts. But the only ethical way is to steal. That's a bit of a tougher argument to make. Oh yeah, I did. Hold on, I got to get to this one. Luke, I commented on it, as a matter of fact. Did you see Joaquin Buckley's tweet about boxing versus MMA pay? We know the score, but man, he's so close to connecting the dots. Also, I'm starting to like Buckley. I like Buckley a lot. He's young. He's got, he wants the smoke. He's hungry. He's talented. He's gotten better. He stays active. Like, there's a lot to like about Joaquin Buckley. And I commented, he's like, how come these guys, these boxers, they don't want the smoke and they're getting the bag and blah, blah, blah. And I just wrote back to him. He didn't respond, but I wrote back. I was like, bro, it's the business model. It's just, that's it. It's just the business model. You guys are subject to one. They are subject, at least for now, to a different one. And that one yields much more money for them. So, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It's just the business model. Like, they all want to make it out to be, oh, it's the character we show versus the character they show. It's what MMA is about versus what, boxing's about. And they try to draw these like virtue distinctions as if like this is what explains why the money goes in one direction or another. No, it's just the business model. That's it. Beginning and end of the conversation. They have one that allows them to do that. That's it. All right. With that in mind, let's go to the paid portion of this. And again, if you want to fire something to the super chat, that would be really appreciated. Or unless you're a member, in which case you can contribute for free. If you have an issue with your stuff being seen, please tag Othello. He is there. He'll let you know. Also, let me make sure I'm checking on my man who's doing the polls here. Oh, Jesus. I got a million text messages. Once again, which announcement do you like the most? 34% said Hill Rountree. I can't believe no questions about that yet. 30% Gaethje-Fiziev, and then 30. Pretty split. Mitchell Silva being third. Is the end of the Anderson Silva-like runs of years as champions over? 43% said yes, too much talent now. 34% said really depends on the division. 22% no, always a new super talent. Interesting. And oh my God, dude. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. All right. I mean, okay. Oh, fucking hell. Oh, God. All right. It just never ends. All right. Okay. So let's do this. Here we go. From the super chat. Topology has Brundage at 60 and Marquez at 72. Oh, for this weekend? Is this the worst co-main of any event in UFC history? This feels like a new low, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, there's definitely been worse ones. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't want to bag on either Brundage or Marquez, but like as a as a co-main, it's just not really the right fight. I think is the nicest way I can put that. Yeah, it's not great. I mean, once again, guys, if people are just going to keep showing up for this stuff and then watching it and then betting on it, they're just going to keep giving it to you. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You know, this is just where we are. Nabil says, you've talked about the UFC homogenizing the fan base, but have you noticed a decrease in your audience? Yes and no. I'd assume your audience is further left than the average UFC fan, probably, so it could be a good canary. Yeah, on certain things, yes. On other ones, no. My audience has definitely, I looked at some of the numbers, they've gotten a little bit older, which makes some sense. But certain things I do have never been bigger, and then certain things I do are getting a little bit more friction than normal. So it's not a one-to-one kind of thing. One has announced the return to Colorado in August. Stoked. It's pretty crazy that one has resonated with more of the population. Definitely quality over UFC. Why do you think it hasn't? Because how do you build a brand when you're here once or twice a year? I mean, you can build a brand overseas. I'm talking about how do you build a brand here? It's tough. Charade says, read the recent biggest what ifs discussion. Here's one. What if BJ Penn stayed with the Marinovich bros, stopped partying, and fully dedicated himself to training full-time in his physical prime? I think he would have been untouchable. I mean, for a while, he was untouchable, but that would have solidified it. That would have solidified it for sure. Rundum Cheek says, Luke, have you watched Grave of the Fireflies yet? I can't find it. If not, consider this a bribe to watch it. Best Ghibli movie of them all. Oh, by the way, Othello wants me to tell you, if you're a member, one super chat per stream. Because what's ended up happening is like guys are putting in like 10 in there. I don't mind if it's 1 or 2, but we got to limit it a little bit there. Just for purposes of moving through them. The T Kogo says, do you think that Trump Musk are running the risk of doing too much too quickly and creating a reactionary blue wave in 2026 midterms? I mean, are we going to have free and fair elections in 2026? That seems to me a little bit presumptuous, if I can be honest with you. I don't like what is the guarantee that we're going to get free and fair elections? Should we get them, I don't think there's any way that there isn't a massive backlash. Again, this is not a careful deconstruction of the government. This is slash and burn. And if shit gets hurt and we fuck ourselves over or innocent people get hurt, they don't give a fuck. Eric, what's up, my friend? Welcome. There you go. Gifting out memberships. Here we go. Cesar. Thank you, Cesar. Appreciate it. Also, Rundum Cheek says, also, I asked BC a similar question, but I'm curious what your answer is. What was the worst experience you've had at a concert? I mean, I feel bad because the lead singer died, but I saw the Tragically Hip with Blues Traveler in like 1999. Wow, they were bad. Not Blues Traveler, but Tragically Hip. They were real bad. I feel bad. The lead singer died, and I know he's important to the Canadian market. I'm not trying to, you know, be a dick, but they were terrible. My namesake, what's up? Brentendo, there he is, finally coming around. Ray says, Luke, interesting week in Little America. World leaders brushing up on their toddler handling skills with Trump. Top G is free in the land of the free. Trump might give him a job. Yeah, apparently, you know, I thought we were trying to deport people who were accused of rape and other crimes. We're trying to import them, it turns out. Did you see Andrew Tate and his brother arrived in the U.S.? I don't know. Well, they were supposed to go to Florida, and then Ron DeSantis was like, we don't want them. I didn't see what happened after that. How long until they are sitting cage side at a UFC pay-per-view? Shortly. I'd be surprised if they didn't. I'd be surprised. Once again, like, this is the family values party. This is it? Okay. How can you be the family values party if when you come around, I would have to tell women in the room to cover their drinks? You know what I'm saying? Ryan says, Luke, if Bryce gets viciously KO'd by Jamahal Silva, will the UFC cut their losses? Nah, they'll milk that shit until it can't be milked anymore. Alex says, I became a member just to tell you that Caio Borralho named his son Liam. Very good. Very good. Hey, I don't hate the name. I don't know any in the real world here in Los Estados Unidos. Lazy Bed, what's up, brother? Thank you, my friend. DJ Serenity now. Seinfeld bit. Nabil, just gifting memberships. Thank you, Nabil. FRS, happy to be a member and support your channel, Luke. Well, thank you, FRS. I appreciate you, bro. And here is Lazybed, just gifting memberships. Thank you, my friend. Brentendo, have you had any family members become MAGA in the past 8 years? No. Well, yes, actually, yes. Sorry, I'll answer that in a second. Most of my previously apolitical family have become extreme MAGAs, first-gen Mexican immigrants, by the way. If so, how do you deal with it? No one in my immediate family is that brain damaged. So no, that's not a thing I've had to deal with. But my extended family is almost all that way. But I don't have really a strong relationship with them, so it doesn't really factor in. I mean, there's people you can talk to for de-radicalization, but it's not anything I've had to deal with. But you know, I can tell you that I've seen a lot of people who I have heard more from people you might be surprised to hear it from. People you know tell me that their family is being torn apart by radicalization that comes from MAGA. And again, I know they're going to say, there's going to be people watching this being like, this is bullshit. Here he is just telling fucking lies. Okay. All right. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to. It's been really surprising who have been estranged from family members by virtue of their radicalization and then them cutting out everybody. So, I mean, I didn't cut out my extended family. I just, my family has just always been, I've just never had ever, but pre-Trump, pre-teenage years, I never had a strong relationship with anyone in my family beyond my immediate circle. They were never really good about being a family. You know, honestly, I'll tell you this, like independent of any kind of political context, I didn't understand how families interacted until I watched my wife's family do it. I didn't know what it meant for like big families to be together. I'm being dead serious. I didn't know what that looked like. I mean, you know, whatever movies or people tell you, but I'm saying like living it, you know, I didn't know what that meant. I had to watch it happen. The Last Stand. How confusing is it for the crowd when stuff like the Cejudo versus the Song debacle happens? Pretty bad. When round 4 started before it was called off, do you think the crowd did the crowd think the fight was going to continue? Yes, of course they did. Of course they did. No question about it. Yeah, it has to suck. That's why these things have to be policed quickly and the audience has to be brought into it. That's why when the referees or the umpires, whatever the proper, you know, the refs in American football, they speak on the mic to the audience so the audience understands what's happening. Same question. Have you had any members become MAGA in the past 8 years? Have become extreme? Yeah, you're going to have to, I'm sorry to tell you, you're going to have to talk to somebody who's got experience in de-radicalization. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I mean, my dad is the opposite. My dad worked for my dad was the lifelong Republican. My dad and my mom. Lifelong Republicans. My mom was disillusioned. My mom died you know, being somewhat disillusioned with Bush over what happened with Iraq, although that was still very, you know, early saber rattling at the time. I remember her telling me they'll never invade. He's not that stupid. She voted for him too, you know, and I was like, I hope you're right. And then, you know, he destroyed everything. And my dad worked for the first President Bush, not when he was in the president. This is long before that, but when he was ambassador to the UN, my dad worked for him. Lifelong Republican, but you know, I don't think those views that he held are any real way part of the current administration. So yeah. Tanvir says, Luke, the Palestine flag has been removed from the Bilal JDM fight promos. Is this the Ari Emanuel effect? Also, thoughts about the latest comments from TKO about the boxing league? They're going to make the boxing league. I don't know what to say about that. What I will say is on the flag thing. So someone tipped me off to this. It's not just that the Palestine flag's not there. I believe they don't use a flag for anyone who reps Hong Kong. And it turns out they might not even do it for anyone who reps Afghanistan. Now, that makes some sense. Hong Kong wants its own, well, the British had it, then they freed it, and it had a tense relationship with Beijing, and then Beijing just took it over. So it kind of had this free spirit thing going for a while as like an independent territory. You recall the controversy over the disputed territory flag that Edmund Shabazian wore and how that caused a lot of or took to the octagon. That caused a lot of problems. Afghanistan fell and is now under ownership of the Taliban. Okay. And then Palestine, obviously is not it's a recognized territory, but not a formally recognized country, although it meets some of the definitions depending on how you want to look at it. And so it seems like if there's any kind of territorial dispute, kind of nation, ethnic strife that goes into it, they remove it. But the point I made on social media is the Olympic Committee, the IOC, recognized Palestine in 1995. Dude, FIFA recognized Palestinian soccer organizations as early as 1929. I mean, they've been repping this on the world stage as a people and as a territory longer than all of us watching this, or probably all of us watching this, have been alive. Like, there's no reason not to do it. I understand not getting to a sanctioned flag or one that is designed to be like intentionally provocative over territorial dispute. And I guess you could argue that the Palestinian flag is that, but that's only if you're giving into the colonial worldview about it. I think if you're going to rep the flag and he gets to walk out with it, there makes very little sense not to put it under his name. Again, this is not a country that takes Palestinian life very seriously. Palestinian identity. Did you see the governor of New York getting rid of Palestinian studies at one of the state universities there, or city universities, I should say? This is not a country that takes Palestinian life seriously, unfortunately. Joe says, two-part question. Out of Dustin, Charles, and Arman, please rank your interest level in each fight for Ilya. Okay. In each hypothetical, what aspects in each fight would be the most interested and excited about? Okay, I'd be the most excited to see him fight Charles 1, Arman 2, Dustin 3. The reason for that is Charles would have the most exciting fight with him. Arman, I think, would be a really interesting test. And Dustin would be great no matter what, but I don't necessarily need to see that one. In each hypothetical, what aspects in each fight would you be most interested in? Okay, in the Charles fight, to what extent Topuria can avoid the clinch. To what extent he can work behind the jab of a guy who can fight at different ranges and is nimble. Also the speed. For Arman, it would just be a question of like, to what extent is the wrestling defensive technique there and the physicality there for Topuria. And then for Dustin, it would just be a good old-fashioned slugfest. Who lasts longer. I tend to think Topuria probably is going to win, but get the idea. Many Faces says, is violence innate to human nature or shaped by society? Both. And how do combat sports help us understand its role in culture and personal? Jesus, this is a fucking AI question. How do combat sports help us understand its role in culture and personal expression? As a sanctioned form of entertainment. Oops, excuse me, hang on. As a sanctioned form of entertainment and violence, it tells us that violence is something that under certain guidelines and in certain packages is part and parcel of the human experience. It is something that we enjoy. It is something that we crave. It is a thrill. It speaks to us innately. And we have figured out a way to craft something that satisfies that bloodlust on reasonably safe and legal lines. You're asking the question, is violence innate? Yes, it is. Can it be shaped by society? Of course, societal forces can do that as well. But I think you have to be honest, any society that takes prize fighting as part of its, how do I say this? Any society that elevates prize fighting probably is a violent one anyway. If you are it's better to take things that are violent and make them safer. Again, the government doesn't have a compelling interest in banning MMA, but it does have one in regulating it. But I think it tells us that we live in a very, very violent society. And however, personality is seen through battle. Personality is seen through style. Personality is seen through effort. And so it speaks to, I think, people's identities and how they feel about themselves and the world and who they are in how they fight and how well they fight and what kind of ferocity they fight with and what kind of style they fight with. All of these things speak to those bigger considerations. Where in the United States, where do you think is the biggest hotbed for MMA gyms? I live in South Florida. I think there's a very good argument for here. Got to be Deerfield Beach, Coconut Creek. I mean, there's so many good gyms out there that are doing amazing things. South Florida has definitely got to be the answer. I mean, you could have said for a long time ago, Southern California. I think it's South Florida now. Many Faces says, can someone deeply understand depression while maintaining an optimistic worldview? Or does true optimism require a degree of detachment from suffering? Yes, you can absolutely understand depression while maintaining an optimistic worldview. That is true. Or does true optimism require a degree of detachment from suffering? I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. If I have a therapist who understands depression very well, in part because they may have experienced it, but also because they treat people with it, they understand it deeply, and they might still believe that this is a troubled world, but help is available. They might feel good about the work that they've done, and they might have a sense of like a mission about helping other people and a certain amount of optimism driving them to do that. That could require a detachment from suffering in the present sense, but not the past sense. So I don't think that these are you're not necessarily setting up two different kinds of people. They can be the same one in the example that you listed. David says, is Henry Cejudo the biggest donk in UFC history? No, fuck. He won 2 titles. How big a donk could he be? I mean, do I think he made an error sitting out at a key time in his career? I don't think it served him all that well, but I don't think no, the guy won 2 fucking weight class titles. I mean, if the biggest donk in UFC history won 2 weight class titles, what does it say about everybody else? Zach says, Luke, have you read any good books on U.S. history? Some, of course. Particularly interested in FDR, the New Deal, but any recommendation? I don't have any on that. FDR and the New Deal, I've not read anything recently about that. I started one on Calhoun and the filibuster, but I'm still so early into it, I don't even know if I could recommend it. Man. That's a better, you know what? That's a better question for Patrick Wyman. I'm going to ask him. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask Patrick Wyman. I'm going to tell him to give me 5 books to recommend to you guys. And then I'm going to come back next week. Othello, send me a text about this, please. I'm going to, I'll tell you what he comes up with. How about that? Where does the Mitchell-Silva fight land on the card? Main card. Do they place it in a fight where he gets the least exposure? No. Or lean into it? Guys, how are they not going to lean into it? They went to Australia, and there's a newspaper that said, knock this racist out. And they took the paper and just posted it on social media as like a way to call them like nervous Nellies and all that. I mean, they're going to lean in. Again, it's not a free speech policy. It's a cashing in on controversy policy. And when you understand that, it makes much more sense. Who do you think between the current champs or any current contenders will be the most likely to break DJ's title defense record? I don't think any of them are even remotely close, nor would I pick any of them. I mean, Islam will be the closest, but I don't think even he'll do it. There's nobody. Keenan, who is your pick between Poatan and Magomed? I probably lean Poatan, not comfortably, but I'll lean Poatan. Luke, how mad would your wife get from a mildly annoyed to sleeping on the couch if you told her the arepa is from Venezuela? Side note, I finally decided to become a member. Thank you, my friend. Well, the arepas come from many places. I will tell you, I actually do like the Venezuelan version better. In Venezuela, they cut it open and stuff it. And in Colombia, they just stack shit on top of it. And they're delicious either way. But I actually prefer the Venezuelan one. And I've told her that, but they just tell me to shut the fuck up. AKA Grumpy Bone, on one of your old RSDs, you showed your love for the 5 true thugs from the Double Glock, Bone Thugs. Which of the crew was your favorite? Probably Flesh and Bone was pretty good for a while. Busy had big personality. Lazy Bone is probably up there as well. You know, there's a bunch you can go. There's a bunch of directions you can go with that one. Look, I love whenever you reference that Onion article, local man overestimates fighting ability by 4,000%. Relevant these days. One of my favorite Hard Times articles titles is Cop Shoots Klansman in Suicide. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Luke, wondering what your thoughts are on the ref cam in MMA. I don't mind it. Personally, I love the angles and feel like it can provide insight on questionable stoppages or fouls seen from the ref's perspective. In general, I think that's right. Yes. WTF is wrong with AG1. Did they donate to Trump's campaign and are they against abortion? No, I just don't personally. I think the evidence shows that what they claim their product does, it does not do. But I'm going to say it one more time, straight up. But once again, please don't take my word for it. BC just disagrees. He fucking loves them. So take it up with him. Luke, as a DC guy, do you have any memories of the Jordan Wizards era in the early 2000s? What was DC like at that time? Yeah, I mean, I was mostly drinking during that time. I didn't go to any games when he played. I wasn't tuned into that, to be honest with you. I wasn't. I mean, everyone was kind of paying attention to it because it was cool, but like, yeah. I think I was partly in New York City for that, and then I came at the tail end, and then I just didn't really care that much. Trayvon says, whether given the point or not, Henry has a loss because he decided to continue. This should be clear to everyone. Jason says as much in their talk. No, not true. If he had taken a point, that would have, when they gone to the judges' scorecards. So either they called about there, no contest, or they go to the next round and then they go to the judges' scorecards. But if a point had been deducted, it would have been a majority draw. No, absolutely not. He got fucked. JP says, Luke, a video series with you explaining current news events to fighters would be hilarious content. Just a visual of you talking about the Middle East with Sean O'Malley nodding along. Hey, there's some smart guys out there. I don't know if there'd be any interest in that, though. Is Elon Musk becoming Lex Luthor without charisma? He's Lex Luthor with ketamine. Oh, he has so much money, he'll never use it. You know, why? He has the most incentive to give back to us. You fucking rubes who believe that. I mean, these are people that show up to their local wallet inspector. Like, obviously stealing from all of us. Fucking hell. Robert says, Luke, when Henry agreed to fight on, doesn't the foul and effects go away? No. Why would it go away? Why was he allowed to quit at the end of the round and be given a chance to win? He wouldn't be given a chance to win. He'd be given a no contest. And if you go to the next round, it goes to the judges' scorecards. That's it. He wouldn't be given a chance to win. Thoughts on Ramadan, not just the religious aspects of it, but also the discipline that goes into it. I don't have anything to say about it on a religious terms, but I have friends who do it, and they all lose shit tons of weight. And I've seen there was a couple of brothers who played in the NFL, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and they had to at times adhere to Ramadan during training. And like, it was real tough for them, like getting up before the sun and then, you know, just stuffing themselves with all the things they would need. It was a real hard time for them. So, you know, obviously it takes a lot of mental discipline to do. And it, you know, people often talk about on fasts of any variety, like how restorative it can feel. And some of that is pretty temporary, but if that's, I mean, obviously there's a religious component to Ramadan, but in general, if those things make you feel good, like, please, like, keep doing them, you know, as long as they're healthy. Robin, welcome to the party. Theo says, thanks for all the content. Always appreciate your MMA takes. Well, thank you, Theo. Or Teo, as they say in certain places. Lil Lou says, the DHS wants immigrants who live in the U.S. illegally to register with addresses and fingerprints. Failure to do so would bring jail time. Don't visas and other programs already handle that info? Yeah, this is just a scam. I mean, obviously, you want to be able to like identify who's in the country and where they are and what they're doing. But this thing where it's like, oh, we're going to get them to sign up, otherwise it's going to be jail. Dude, they're not going to go, right? Like some of them will, obviously, but if you show up, they're probably rightly going to assume they're just going to grab you. And then if you don't have any legal right to being here, they're just going to deport you, and who the fuck knows, right? So your neighbor has a non-zero chance of showing up at Guantanamo in certain cases. What was the other part of it? The other one that I love that I think is so funny is like, do you guys see that Dr. Phil ride along? We're like, we're gonna go get all these illegals, and it's like, okay, all right, well, who are you targeting? And it's like, well, this guy has a warrant out for sexual assault, and we're gonna go get him. And it's like, well, why didn't you just go get him when you were needing him for sexual? Like, why are you doing this like tough on immigration bit? Oh, that's right, because you're doing it to help manufacture consent for these broader policies that will probably prove unpopular over time. But okay, that's what you're doing it for. But like, if the dude did that crime, just go get him. What are you waiting on? Just go get him. Oh, you're now this guy. We've known this guy has been, he's been raping women, and but now that we know he's they already known that he was illegal. Now we're gonna go get it. Like, bitch, you knew this is just pretense for manufacturing consent. Get the fuck out of here. With Twitter X Meta being state run, will we have ability for mass org in February 2026? I don't know. You intend on acting in response to shift in totalitarianism. Pol Pod? Well, I don't know about like the way in which you framed it, but like I said, March 17th. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Thoughts on Eubank Ben? Seems like a big fight for the UK. Eubank is a fringe world level guy, but he's over the hill and not technical enough to hold a title. Ben is easy to dislike and hasn't even boxed beyond British level. Yeah, but it's a fucking awesome grudge match. It's a fucking awesome grudge match. I share your thoughts on Elon. Did you hear a judge is looking into if him running Doge is even constitutional? Of course it's not fucking constitutional. USAID in 1998 was an act of, it was reified anyway through an act of Congress. This was not an executive order. You can just take it down. They just went through and fucking, and they didn't completely get rid of it. They just moved it into state. Oh, fucking great. Like, none of this shit is constitutional. Like, everyone talks about how Clinton did this in the 90s, which is true, except they did a 6-month survey that was a bipartisan council that looked at all of this, made recommendations. It was passed into law, and then exercised over time so as not to disrupt the market and or the ability of the federal government to do its job. It's the complete exact opposite, dude. But the reality is there are people that think that like the vandalism that he's doing is a service to them because they're very confused about the way the world works. And the reality is, until it just comes crashing down on them, this is not an argument they're going to be amenable to. Did you see Masaki? I'm going to pronounce the last name wrong. Is fighting Taiwan Chai for the one kickboxing title. I did now. I know you're not into MT Muay Thai and kickboxing, but this is a huge fight. I hope you watch it. I'll definitely watch that. I definitely watch it. I rely on people like Liam to tell me what's up, but I definitely will watch that. Look, I'm 25 and I just bought my first apartment. Any advice on home ownership and balancing finance and mortgage? Save everything. Save everything. Here's a perfect example. My bathroom is just on the other side of this camera. Last week, after last live chat, I go in there, use the bathroom, go out, I wash my hands, or try to wash my hands anyway. I turn my sink on and water just explodes underneath the sink. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So call the plumber. Plumber shows up and he's like, well, you got good news and bad news for you. I'm like, okay, what's the good news? He's like, I can fix this. I'm like, okay, what's the bad news? Bad news is you need a whole new faucet, the whole thing. I was like, okay, all right. $1,000 later, because they had to get like all the insane equipment to get all of the piping and plumbing out. I now have a new, well, I mean, the sink is still the same, but I now have a new faucet, right? This will happen all the time. All the time, you'll be surprised. Your washing machine just breaks. Someone throws a rock through your fucking window. You name it. Save. It's a good idea to save more generally, but as a homeowner, I have found there'll be months that go by where everything works exactly as it needed to. You don't have hail or inclement weather. You don't have to get a roof rake. There's no flooding, none of that shit. Like, everything works just the way it's supposed to. All the appliances work. Everything's great. And then there's going to be 3 months where all that shit comes apart and you need to have money to fix it. Otherwise, your living condition goes haywire instantly. Now, I don't know what your situation is with the apartment complex and what they can do for you, but I'm on my own. If my fridge breaks, I got to replace it, right? So I save like a motherfucker, man. I save, and it helps me out because I cannot tell you how many times I was like, I needed to have money for some kind of an issue, and then boom, something happened, and you have to have it. Save everything. Any thought on Pride being called the best MMA promotion of all time? It's not, but in its heyday, there was nothing like it. Just curious to hear your thoughts in honor of the Dark Side of the Cage shows about Pride. Pride never die. It's not the best one ever, but it was a true moment in time where they were just operating by their own rules, and they had total creative vision, and it was such a different look. It was just also a time when the polarity of MMA, where Japan was essentially the capital of it, and now that's not the case. Now the US is the capital of it, but it's also more globalized now. But at the time, it was a question of polarity. Amazing organization, but they also had tons of problems. Getting in bed with the Yakuza really fucked everything. And not everything that they did a lot of squash matches and a lot of bullshit stuff, and there's a lot of problems. Is a 10-minute first round really necessary? It does make for interesting historical moments, but there's problems with it too. Walker says, I had my first child 2 months ago. Congratulations. It's much more difficult than I anticipated. Yes, it is. Any tips on how to function while sleep deprived? I cannot tell you how much better I got at functioning through sleep deprivation after my daughter was born than before it. I can get by on almost no sleep. Now, I can't function great, but I can physically go through my day. I couldn't do that before I had my kid. Even in the Marine Corps, after 4 hours, I'd be like, I need some sleep, and then of course that's not always possible, but it's tough. You have to learn how to, I'm not kidding when I say this, you have to learn how to go without sleep. I don't have learn how to take naps where you can, learn how to catch up where you can, give yourself a break where you can. There's all kinds of things you can do to do upkeep, but I'm telling you, bro, the number one thing you have to do, could not be more serious. You have to learn how to be good through sleep deprivation, not how to get none of it. It's going to be there. And if you got a fussy baby, after 3 months, we finally got it, then there's going to be sleep regression at 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half. It just happens all the fucking time, So stay disciplined. Be very, very disciplined about their sleeping habits. I've recommended that book a million times, 12 weeks to 12 hours of sleep. You got to be, dude, I remember when my daughter was born, if it was time for a nap, I didn't give a shit where we were. I was putting her down on schedule, and that helped over time. But the truth is, you just got to learn how to deal with it. I'm sorry to tell you that. Also, what was the deal with Instagram yesterday? My feed was full of murders, violence, and people being eaten by animals. I don't know, Darcy. That is up to you. I do not know. Did you see Jim Miller's video about eye pokes? Yes, I did. Jim Miller obviously has a lot of interesting and smart observations about it. It's not even that I disagree with him. I actually don't disagree with him, but I want to put a little twist on it. He basically makes the point that if your hands are this way, and he had a glove on while he was talking, if your hand is this way, how can you ever poke someone in the eye? You can only poke it in the eye, and not even this. This won't work. Has to be this way. This. You have to do that. And that, he says, comes from typically, though not always, but typically defensive reactions. And so what he believes are those kinds of reactions should be heavily penalized by taking a point. And he also says by going after the purse, which I'm a little less inclined to do given that pay is shit for fighters, but separate conversation. He believes that you should penalize your way out of it. And the reality is, I think that there is an enormous amount of truth to it. However, that does not preclude us from also finding any kind of technological solution. In fact, I think deciding that one approach or the other is best and we don't need to use both is a mistake. It's a big mistake. I'm all in favor of the penalization scheme that the vision that he had come up with. I'm totally on board with it. I'm totally okay with it. I'm fine with it. But we need better gloves too. Policy solutions yield results, often the best results. but there's no reason why it has to be the only one, especially if there's going to be some pain along the way to get people to adapt to it. Saul says, how much does UFC pay-per-view pay for pay-per-view points? It depends. There's a tier that they pay from every buy from 1 to 200,000. Then there's a different amount they pay from 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to $1 million or whatever. There's different tiers, and each contract says, for each buy at this stage, you get this much. So it goes up and up and up. But the idea is that you get an allotment of money tied to the sales of the pay-per-view. What role, if any, did Schaub play in your Showtime hire? A huge role. No skits and bits. I like and watch him and would love a preview of you both for 314. Love you. Thanks for everything. A huge role. He introduced me to the guy's still my boss, Brian Daly. He introduced him to me and put in a good word for me. And they were looking to expand their content offerings. But for Brendan, I don't know how I get that job. I'm being dead serious. Like, I don't know how I'm like, who is going to introduce me to him to make that happen? Like, it just doesn't happen, Willie says, nothing turns you into a centrist like being put in a twister. As my neck was cranked to the left and my legs pointed right, I suddenly respected all political views on both sides. It'll change you, man. I got hit with one. I told you, Ryan Hall hit me with one. It was bad. It was bad. Please invite Othman over for some pizza. Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back. Now that Ilya has moved up, who do you see as Pico's first fight and his chances at gold? We'll have to see what happens with some of these 45 fights between Bryce and Jean Silva, between Pitbull and Yair and everything else. We'll have to kind of see what the lay of the land is. But I would suspect top contender fight right away. Top contender right away. Using my monthly free milestone chat to say this, Luke, regarding that other guy, Grave of the Fireflies is excellent, but not the best Ghibli movie. Mega sad, bring tissues, you'll only watch once. Okay, duly noted. Terrence says, Ron DeSantis is trying to push his wife to run for governor after him. We are 2 years from being a monarchy. We left England to become it. You agree? I think monarchy is a little strong. But I sent you guys that essay, or I showed it to you, on competitive authoritarianism. I think that's certainly an inevitable part of our future. Luke, I know you used to like photography. Have you still been spending time with that or other hobbies? I have not. I regret that. I really do enjoy photography. I did install a bird feeder in my front yard. I've been watching the birds. Bro, you get old enough, you just start liking birds. I don't know what to tell you. It just happens. Like, oh, Luke, you're real fucking old. Yep. Yeah. I like birds. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I think birds are cool, Jacob says, I'm the GOAT. I'm not. But he says, MAGA dorks need to touch grass. Again, all these motherfuckers. It's always amazing to me that it's like literally you can swing a dead cat in MMA and find someone who's got the exact same, if you're a MAGA, you can find the exact same views as you, or at least pretty fucking close. Like, everybody's like that. The leadership is like that. The fighters are like that. The sponsors are like that. The fucking influencers are all like that. Like, everybody is like that. And then there's like one person like me, and it fucking sends them into a rage. It's like, I get why triggering us is like their thing that they always want to do, because my very existence is triggering to them. It almost feels like it's revenge to them. Like, you know what I mean? Cejudo said that his parents were illegal immigrants, then said he was actively helping Trump get reelected. And what's with that ignorant comment about being surprised Sadong spoke English? Guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm not Latino. I don't speak for them, but just observing them as I have over time, and then obviously marrying into a Hispanic family, Latin people are very conservative. Very conservative. Like, that is like the least fucking surprising thing ever. I've said this before, dude. You go to Colombia. Colombia is a very conservative country. Like, no question about it. Beautiful country, of course. I mean, that's not in any way me saying it's bad, but that's just the political nature of it. And obviously Venezuela's had some troubles. But, dude, Latin America is, there's absolutely, never, ever, 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 ever be surprised. Even when you're in situations like, oh, well, like my parents were this or my sister is that. Doesn't matter. And yes, being surprised Sadong spoke English. Or no, Yadong. Song Yadong. Again, these people are like, oh, like, don't let it bother you. And it's like, it's not the joke. Guys, if you break open a fortune cookie, what is the joke? The joke is, oh, he's Chinese. like, or Asian or whatever. Like, that's the joke. And we're just going to use like takeout symbolism to make there's no joke. There's no joke. I mean, if you're gonna, like, I'm not saying that there aren't jokes that are great, that are off color. In fact, I think some of the very best comedians that have ever lived have trafficked in that. But there has to be a punchline. Just showing up with a big ass fortune cookie, that's just racism. there's no punchline. It's like, hey, he's a big ass fortune cookie. Okay, what's the joke? Oh, he's from Asia. Okay. Is there anyone more inconsiderate of others' times than people who buy a bunch of lottery tickets in front of you at the gas station? Man, those people are struggling. You got to give them a hand, man. You don't have to ask for me because I already sent a question, but can you ask me if there's any plans on special badges for us members over the 1 year mark? Ooh, yes. I got to talk to Ant about that. Yes, good question. Great question. Othello, send me a note about this, please, as well. Yeah, good. I'll look into that. Great. Very good question. What are the odds of Trump's third-term project succeeding? Why would anybody, even his supporters, want someone that old in power? Why would they want to keep their regime in power, even with an old figurehead at it? Dude, you already have a secondary president. You see fucking Musk basically running a cabinet meeting yesterday? Like, do you think they give a fuck? Biden was old. They would never do that. They don't have any principles. Guys like him don't have any principles. It's power and avarice first, period. So why would they do that? Quite obviously, so they could maintain power and then indulge their avarice. That is not hard to figure out. Luke, you do know you're being trolled with these political questions, right? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes I'm not. And I don't give a fuck. I'm going to answer them how I want. John, what's up, bud? My fam is Mexican. Some immigrant, first and second gen. Some are left, some right. Most don't care, but we still manage to get along. Amazing every day. Good. Sad to see people on both sides so consumed by politics. That is exactly how it should be. It is a melting pot. We should leave it that way. This gentleman writes, thoughts on Trump's FBI director wanting to collab with UFC to train FBI. Guys, when was the last time you can recall a big FBI bust that happened because the field agent could Turkish get up their own weight? I mean, am I really going to complain that these guys are going to be in, I guess, better shape if they have some protocol that is introduced? Of course not. I don't think it really is that big a deal. But it's like, I don't know that I don't need FBI agents in the field to be like out of shape, but I don't think that's necessarily like, these guys all came to power and like prices are going up and there's issues with Medicaid spending and allotments, and like they're not fixing anything. I mean, all right, give it time. Okay, give it time. Fine. It's been a month. How much can they really do in a month? Fine. But this isn't meaningfully fixing anything that the FBI needs actually fixing with. This is just, these people love the pomp and circumstance and the pageantry and show of muscular force. And they think any proximity to it, like by osmosis, helps them. It's just a waste of everyone's time. But like, whatever. What's the greatest movie ever made and why is it The Princess Bride? It is not. It is probably The Last Emperor is one of my favorite movies. But you could go other directions. You could go, there's a bunch of it. Fuck. I got the Ron poster. You could do Birds by Hitchcock. You could, the Gene Hackman died, French Connection, fantastic movie. There's a lot of directions you can go. Look, in all your years training BJJ, have you ever put someone in I don't know what the fuck that is. I don't know what that is. Is that some kind of racist joke? I don't know. Palestinians support Hamas at a 75% clip. Lebanon harbors and supports terrorists. That's a very interesting framing of it. You know who else doesn't care about Palestinians? Muslim countries, surrounded by them, but just can't be bothered. Yeah, this is something you would say if you knew fuck all about the situation. The reason first of all, Jordan has taken millions of Palestinians already, as has Egypt, but in particular, Jordan, there's a giant Palestinian diaspora that is over there. I've been to Jordan. I can tell you about it. I don't know if you've been to Jordan. The reality is the reason why they don't take them is because they refuse to pick up the mess of Israel's problems, right? That's why they don't take them. They're not going to just allow Israel to engage in ethnic cleansing and say, we're just going to push these guys over the border. Oh, you're Arab. by the way, there's like vast differences between Arabs from all the way from Morocco to Palestine and everything in between, and then just say, clean our mess for us. That's why they don't take it. Also, what I would add to that is the reason you just made up 75%. The polling that I saw was much closer to greater than 50, still a majority support Hamas because they are the legitimate heir to Palestinian resistance for national sovereignty. Who else would support them but Hamas? It certainly is not going to be Israel. I mean, we can obviously they would just ethnically cleanse or murder them all if they had their way. So they're going to go with, granted, these are fucked up, flawed people. Please don't misunderstand me. I am no fan of them, but it's the sort of a similar situation to any kind of insurgent rebellion in any kind of place that is naturally that group is the outgrowth of legitimate military resistance to for aims of national sovereignty, which have been thwarted, since the 40s, essentially. So there's that as well. And then the last part I would say, I've been to Lebanon as well. I don't know if you have, but I've been there. And the police don't really have much of a role at all in Lebanon. The army kind of serves as police, but they don't really have much of a standing army. Hezbollah was created in the 20th century, the late 20th century, to help push out Israeli invaders into territory. That's why they exist. The army itself cannot do it. So, I mean, you can spit back to me things that other people tell you about the world that you clearly do not understand, but I understand them. I have been to these places. I have family from these places. I have studied these conflicts throughout the entirety of my life, and I have seen these places. I am telling you, everything you wrote is completely, totally fucking wrong. Do you foresee a future where the biggest star of MMA is Mexican, a la Canelo in boxing? Unlikely, but possible. Possible. What's with the Jessica Andrade erasure? When people mention UFC fighters with KOs in 3 divisions, no one ever mentions her. Because she's still a relevant force, but she's not like beating the door down on like, she's making a push. So it's kind of like she's just like relevant and there, but that's it, you know? Speaking of books, have you read any MMA fighter autobiographies? I could not imagine a bigger waste of time. I highly recommend Mark Hunt's Born to Fight. Maybe his is good. I've not read it, but the notion of like looking into that when half the fighters have just become milkshake ducks, not interesting to me. Why is it okay to be upset so strongly about someone stealing from you? I feel the government has stolen way more from Americans. I don't know who has stolen more than the government. Like, I can't respond to that if you don't tell me what was stolen from you. I mean, it's very possible, but like this is so open-ended that I don't know what to say. Also, why is it okay to be upset so strongly about someone stealing from you? I mean, is that a fucking serious question? Come on, guys. Look, I just saw you breathe out of your mouth. Does that technically make you a mouth breather? Yes. What is there to think about the somewhat speculative reports that the U.S. government pressured Romanian prosecutors to allow the Tate brothers to leave? Do Trumpists just love? I don't know I mean, they like any booster. It doesn't matter how like awful they are. Any booster they'll just take, and he's a popular one. So there's that. I don't know if someone mentioned this already, but did you see the masterpiece AI animation of Gaza by the most powerful? Yeah, truly. The AI thing where they're just going to turn Gaza into the Riviera, like these fevered dreams of ethnic cleansing. And by the way, like it won't look like that. There's going to have to be military to hold it. It's going to be your neighbors if they do that. How much was Bivol's performance down the stretch down to him being an elite boxer, and how much was it down to Beterbiev being 40? I think it's a big part. I thought he started to show his age in the later rounds. I thought so too. But I also believe that like they clearly prepped Bivol for a big push down at the end of the last 8 to 12, the last third of the bout. They clearly it seemed to me anyway that they had a concerted effort to be extra in those moments, and that really was disruptive. Michael says, my grandpa used to sit with me in the garage and show me all his boxing VHS tapes. He always told me that the most overlooked thing was a fighter's IQ. Seems like in MMA, this point is overlooked. It is a little bit in MMA because it's such an offense-first sport, whereas in boxing, it is offense primarily, but defense is way more important and way more, frankly, necessary. That's not quite right. Certain ways in which defense are more important, more ever present, as certainly the bare minimum. And so good decision making and the blending of the two was a high priority. Thank you for the donation, Jules. Mr. In Between, it's 95.98 on RT. Thank me later. I don't know what the fuck that means. Thoughts on Elon's disastrous cap? I mean, I've been over this. I appreciate the donation, Joe, but I can't keep going back. I mean, it's just, Are you participating in the economic blackout? I only learned about this today. I mean, I normally don't go buying shit anyway. I'm not out there like, oh, I'm shopping. I'm saving. I don't know about you motherfuckers. I'm saving. So I guess, but I don't have any. I guess. I don't have any plans to buy anything. Did you see that the official House GOP judiciary just tweeted Epstein file released, and it's a link? The Rick Astley never going to give you up. I did not. I've obviously been here with you guys, but that's crazy. For what it's worth, it seems evident that you are making a strong effort to take your time in reading and comprehending questions. Your great show is better for it. Thank you. Yes, I am trying. I'm sure I'm going to make errors, but I've heard enough complaints that I have to make a change, and I've been trying to do that. Thank you for noticing. International movie recommendation, Black Box Diaries. It's about a Japanese reporter that started the Me Too movement over there. It's 100 on, Rotten Tomatoes. Is that what this was? Mr. In Between, 95.98 on Rotten Tomatoes. Got it. Okay. Got it. And then this one, it's 100 on Black Box Diaries. Duly noted. Okay. If Trump were to pass away in office, do you think things would get better, or would they continue his agenda? Well, I think JD Vance is like way fucking smarter than Trump. Like by orders of magnitude, much smarter. So I think in certain ways they would be the same. I think in certain ways it'd be different. I think it would largely continue. What's the official LT position on adding a stat line for IQ score to tail of the tape? IQ is mostly bullshit, guys. I'm sorry to tell you that. It's not entirely bullshit, but it's mostly bullshit. Devin says, advice with immigration lawyers in a scary spot. Get one. Anybody who's got any issue related to immigration, even if you're a citizen and you got someone in your family who's not, you need to be talking to a motherfucking immigration attorney immediately. Do not, they're again, I'm not, everyone, no one is going to care. No one who disagrees with me is going to care until shit comes crashing down on them. There's nothing else I can say. But one thing I can tell you what's happening is for people on domestic flights, so like, Wichita to, New Mexico, whatever, they're asking people for their status. They're pulling people into rooms. They're grabbing people up, people who are green card holders, depending on what kind of green card you had. If you left the country and then you come back, depending on what green card, and they may not let you on your own fucking green card. You need to talk to an immigration attorney immediately. Illusions. There you go, my friend. Favorite send-off fight for Dustin this summer? It's a tough one, man. Max? Favorite album of all time? Y'all already know. Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power. Game changer in my life. Game changer. No Chill says, no chill. Oh, can't remember. Thank you, my friend. Chad says, thoughts on Dana's bizarre comment that you never take a point from a fighter for an unintentional foul. I just think a lot of people think that, and it's completely the opposite of how the rules work. Isn't there an argument? It's not an argument. It's a fucking rule for 2 points being taken. Sorry. Isn't there an argument for 2 points being taken from you, Don? 2 seems strong. Well, you could do it. Dean took 2 points from Marquardt. You could do it. It's a little strong. But I hope everyone understands there's an entire set of rules for intentional fouls, unintentional fouls. There's both. Why didn't anyone care about the Jamahal Hill-Yuri eye poke? Yuri literally took 2 knuckles deep into the eye. Why doesn't the UFC enforce the rules? If the fighter doesn't make a bigger stink about it, it kind of is what it is. Also, it's hard to know exactly what the long-term effect was for him, or the immediate effect was for him versus Henry. It's hard to know what the eye pokes do situation to situation. How much do you read a day, and do you allocate time to read? So I read all day long. I just never stop. I just read all day long. Trying to read more and get fatigued after 20 minutes. That's okay. Thank you for what you do. So here's what I would say. I read all day long. I do take special moments in my day to read a book. I make a special carve out for that. If all you can get is 20 minutes, that's okay. Dude, you can do a lot of reading in 20 minutes if you do it consistently every day for the course of a month, right? That's a lot. That's a shitload. I mean, a 200-page book can be read between 7 and 9 hours. If you're reading 20 minutes a day, think about how much you can do over the course of a year doing that. I mean, it's not like a huge amount of books, but like at a bare minimum, 1 or 2 a month. Right. So just do it. Just and you'll notice your stamina slowly go up. Also, you have to stop scrolling if you can. Derpler says, you're a bright spot in MMA. Lately, feel like ditching the sport as I tire of financially supporting the worst people in the world. Once again, I've tried to explain to people that the boycott has already happened. But thank you, Derpler. I appreciate your support, and thanks for sticking around. Ever seen M by Fritz Lang? I feel like I'm familiar with this, but not offhand. German film about a serial killer. One of the first films with sound. No, I've not seen this. Also, why won't you just accept the refugees I created was literally a defense that Hitler used? Yeah. Yes, fix our problems for us. Doesn't work that way. Luke, philosophy nerd here. You like Baudrillard and some. I mean, Jesus, my brain can't even fire on this shit. Been talking with hyper reality with friends a lot lately. This is a type of philosophy that I basically did very little on. To the extent we did any kind of scenario like this, like Nozick's brain in a vat type thing. That's the full extent of it. It never went beyond this. So you're dealing with something that is a legitimate form of philosophical inquiry, just not one that I have anything meaningful to add to. I believe you said you've considered someday moving to Colombia. I don't see how I can retire in the United States and I do better than most Americans, you know? How would you feel living in a place where most people are conservative? I don't give a fuck about it. I mean, political influences mean different things in different countries. I would have no problem living in Colombia. I don't have any issue with that. I mean, I'm not like looking to move there or anything, but again, I don't know how. I have a 401k. I own a home. I don't know how I'm going to be able to retire in the United States. I don't know how that's mathematically possible. And there's way more people doing worse than me. So it just kind of gives you an indication of like, if you want any kind of quality of life, this is what I mean. Like, we need somebody to fix some of these issues. Right. But okay, different conversation for a different time. So yeah, I could easily live there. It's really not much of an issue. I'll tell you this much, like Colombian people they're happy people. They're happy people. And whatever the political differences you might have with them or any other people, I don't know. Isn't it nice to be around people who are happy? Like, isn't that a wonderful thing? If you can find it in this world, like it just lifts your spirits. It lifts, it does a lot. It's good for you. It's good for you to be around people that are happy. Devin says, thank you, Luke. Going through a tough time. You help. I'm sorry, Devin. I'm doing my best. All right. We're out of here. Tank Roach live stream Saturday. I'll see you there. You got any questions? You can email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. We done. Thanks for everyone who participated, who watched, who liked, who subscribed, who donated. I love you all the members. I love you even more, but I love you all just the same. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Until next time, stay frosty, boys and girls. Bye.